All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're skipping the price hype entirely and popping the hood on Bitcoin. We are getting right into the math, the cryptography, and the actual code that gives Bitcoin its title as the ultimate digital gold. I'm super excited you're here because we're going to deconstruct exactly how this decentralized peer-to-peer cash system actually ticks. So before we get into the nuts and bolts, we really have to look at the massive hurdle early digital money faced. Think about how the internet works for a second. If I text you a photo, I'm not handing you the original file, right? I'm just sending you a perfect copy. I still have the original on my phone, which is awesome for data, but it's an absolute disaster for money. This is the infamous double spending problem. I mean, how do you stop someone from spending the exact same digital coin twice without relying on a centralized bank to check the ledger? To really grasp how this network solves that, we're going to break this down into 5 parts. We'll start with the trustless money revolution, move into proof of work and mining, then explore cryptography and the UTXO model, dive into absolute digital scarcity, and finally, we'll actually simulate the halving code ourselves. All right, part 1, the trustless money revolution. Let's peel back this first layer to see why relying on financial institutions as trusted third parties actually totally limits native internet commerce. Back in 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto dropped the foundational white paper, stating that a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Basically, the traditional internet relies way too heavily on banks to act as referees. But this trust-based model, it's got some pretty glaring weaknesses. It requires mediation for disputes, which jacks up transaction costs, and it totally kills the possibility for small, casual microtransactions. Satoshi's goal was to replace that trust-based banking system with an unbreakable system of cryptographic proof. Which brings us right back to our double spending dilemma. Because without a central server or a bank deciding who spent what and when, the network needs a completely new kind of engine. Participants literally have to chronologically agree on a single, indisputable history of transactions. They need a consensus mechanism. And that takes us to section 2, proof of work and mining. We're peeling back the second layer now to look at the engine securing the network, which is fueled by pure energy and computation. So here's the step-by-step heartbeat of the whole network. First, new transactions are broadcast out to all the nodes. Then specialized participants, who we call miners, collect these transactions and bundle them into a block. Now, to lock that block into the official history, those miners have to compute an incredibly difficult proof-of-work math problem. Once it's solved, the block is broadcast and added to the longest chain. This process ensures that if an attacker wanted to alter a past transaction, they'd have to outpace the entire honest network and redo an absolutely impossible amount of computational work. Now, the actual mechanism behind that math problem uses what's called the SHA-256 hashing algorithm. Miners are essentially playing this massive, high-speed game of guess and check. They're brute forcing a random number called a nonce, just trying to find a hash that meets a specific target. And finding that valid hash proves that a massive amount of real-world energy was spent. But here is the truly genius part. The difficulty of this puzzle automatically adjusts every 2016 blocks. So if miners plug in faster hardware, the puzzle just gets harder. This guarantees a steady, uncheatable drumbeat of one block roughly every 10 minutes, no matter how advanced the tech gets. Moving on to section 3, cryptography and the UTXO model. We know how transactions are agreed upon, but let's look at how ownership is actually proven and transferred on this distributed ledger when there are literally no bank accounts. The secret sauce here is the UTXO, or unspent transaction output. So instead of tracking one single balance on a spreadsheet like your bank does, your total balance is mathematically derived from all the individual unspent outputs linked to your cryptographic keys. It's actually a lot like physical cash in your physical wallet. You don't just have a balance of $30. You have a $20 bill and a $10 bill. When you go to spend it, you hand over the bills and you get change back in the form of brand new UTXOs. When you contrast these two models side by side, it's a massive paradigm shift. The traditional account model relies on a database of current balances heavily guarded by a central bank, right? If somebody hacks the database, the balances change. But the UTXO model is completely different. It's a continuous chain of digital signatures and unspent checks verified by the entire network. This is brilliant because it means every single Satoshi in your wallet is mathematically verifiable all the way back through its transaction history to the exact second it was mined. To really visualize this, try not to think of standard wallets and coins.
Instead, think of wallets as keys and coins as cryptographic checks. The blockchain itself is like this massive, transparent wall of locked glass safes. Anyone can walk right up to a safe, look through a thin slot, and verify exactly how much value is sitting inside. Anyone can deposit a check through that slot, but only the person holding the specific private key can actually open up the safe and spend those funds. By using asymmetric cryptography, this lock and key system completely gets rid of the need for human escrow. It gives you absolute mathematical authority over your own funds.
Okay, section 4, absolute digital scarcity. We've established how the network is secure and how you own your funds. Now let's dive into the economics layer and contrast the infinite printing of fiat currency with Bitcoin's programmatic, hard-capped supply. 21 million, that's it. This glowing number represents the absolute ceiling of the money supply. It's a hard cap that is strictly enforced by pure arithmetic, not by the fleeting promises of central bankers or politicians. There will literally never, ever be more than 21 million Bitcoin in existence. And the most crucial point to understand here is that this 21 million cap isn't just some random rule bolted onto the system that a board of directors could just vote to change tomorrow. Not at all. It is the natural mathematical output of the halving schedule calculating a geometric series. Because the issuance of new coins given to miners is slashed in half every 210,000 blocks, the supply curve naturally flattens out over time. This creates a highly predictable, totally disinflationary monetary policy. And looking at the historical data, it proves this exact economic impact. Back in 2012, the block reward dropped and the inflation rate fell to 8%. By 2016, it dropped to 4%. By 2020, 2%. Every subsequent 4-year epoch effectively cuts the inflation rate in daily issuance right in half. This structurally engineered scarcity steadily drives the asset's economic utility as a long-term store of value, which is a massive differentiator from inflationary fiat currencies that are constantly losing purchasing power. Which brings us to section 5, simulating the halving code. For this final layer, we're going to look directly at the underlying Python architecture. We really want to prove that this scarcity isn't just some empty promise. It is governed by cold, hard, unchangeable math. So our simulation starts with these foundational variables, exactly as they were hard-coded into the Genesis blueprint way back in 2009. The initial reward given to miners was 50 Bitcoin per block. The interval to trigger a halving event is exactly 210,000 blocks. And the ultimate precision scale goes all the way down to 8 decimal places, which is known as a Satoshi. All right, let's look under the hood at what this programmatic logic actually does. The code takes the current block height and divides it by 210,000. That tells the system exactly how many halving eras we've entered. Then, using a really clever process called a bitwise right shift, it programmatically slashes that block reward in half. And there's this maximum limit parameter built right in that ensures after 64 shifts, the reward drops to absolute zero. Any fractions of a Satoshi, they just get truncated and discarded. These few lines of code effectively operate like an unbreakable digital vault mechanism. They just mechanically execute the scarcity schedule without fail, block after block, year after year. When we plug different block heights into our scarcity simulator, we can perfectly map out past and future issuance. At Genesis, it was 50 BTC. At the very first halving, it mathematically dropped to 25. By the fourth halving in 2024, specifically at block 840,000, it sits at 3.125 BTC. And we know for an absolute fact that around 2028, it's going to fall to 1.5625. This proves that the ultimate supply ceiling is entirely knowable down to the exact Satoshi, literally decades in advance. So, pulling this all together, by combining the massive energy expenditure of proof-of-work, the localized security of public key cryptography and UTXOs, and this beautifully deterministic supply code, the network achieves absolute censorship resistance and immutable scarcity. The real hero of this economic model isn't a CEO or a foundation. It is the code itself. The code ensures that the rules apply equally to absolutely everyone, undeniably earning its title as the ultimate digital gold. I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer. For the very first time in human history, we have an asset where the exact supply is mathematically guaranteed and it exists purely in a digital realm, where literally everything else can be infinitely copied. So what does that actually mean for the future of value? I highly encourage you to carry that concept forward and keep it top of mind as you dive into the next modules in Web3. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.